Classic country clothes have long been the uniform of choice for blue-blooded Brits, but they've rarely been fashionable until now.
There's something about that kind of old England and tradition, and I just think the English have such a strange but brilliant sense of style that it's just a constant inspiration.
Whether in fashion or not, this look says something about the people who wear it.
All these clothes are intended as class indicators. Of course they are. It's part of the British armoury against the world and its horribleness.
In fact, the biggest fan of this style is the poshest person of all, the Queen. And she's become an unlikely trendsetter. In 2008, her look was hijacked by the kings of bling, Dolce & Gabbana.
Royal dressing does stand for something in people's eyes all over the world. It stands for things that endure, values that endure.
The genius of traditional British style is that it's perfectly practical, and stitched into every garment is a little bit of the country dream.
I view these things as sort of works of art. I don't necessarily like me in them either. I look in the mirror and I think, well, the only thing that's wrong with this is the head. All the rest is nice.
These clothes are world famous, but the stories behind them are not. Landscape, the weather, war, class, nostalgia.
Put it in one word, is romance. You know, especially when times are hard, a little bit of romance gets you through.
They're constantly evolving, being reinvented and updated for the world we live in. If there was ever a look that summed up British style, then it would be these classic outdoor clothes, designed to protect us one way or another from the outside world. Lord James Percy, known as the best shot in England, has another, more surprising string to his bow. He's style director for Barbour, one of the most successful clothing companies in Britain. James Percy has designed award-winning coats for the brand.
Well, I'm involved with Barbour in the development of a technical sporting range, which uses state-of-the-art fabric technology, and we marry that to functional design. You missed one yet?
Not one, by the way.
That'll be the coat, not the gun.
Barbour have been making their trademark wax jackets for over a century, but they moved up a gear when a feature film about the Queen showed her wearing one behind the wheel of her Land Rover.
The first we knew about this was the day after the premiere. A lady walked into our store in New York and asked for the jacket that the Queen was wearing in the film. Pretty soon after that, our sales, certainly in New York, had pretty well doubled.
America may have only just cottoned on to the Barbour, but our continental neighbours have been wearing them for decades. James Percy knows the jackets and the people who wear them inside out.
Our European customers, they tend to like their coats to be pristine and brand new, shiny and dark green as they come out of the factory. The British, on the whole, for the home market, they like to have their coats pretty much trashed. Shows they've lived in them for like 10, 20, 30 years, ripped and smelly and a lovely soft, oily finish. Just getting it that nice little bit of distress. Look at that. Nice. What else can we do to it? We've hit the coat absolutely full on. We've peppered it there, there. Even left a bit of lead on that bit. Hardly even marked it actually. So you hit by a shotgun at that range, you'd be knocked off your feet. I wouldn't say it was bulletproof, but that is unbelievably tough. Should be about right now.
It's one of those things that you get really attached to, Barbour. And because it's incredibly practical, completely waterproof, huge pockets, you kind of feel that there's something invincible about you. You sort of, it's taking on a persona.
These coats have come a long way since their humble beginnings. Barbour's story is one of wax to riches. Founded by door-to-door salesman John Barbour in 1894, the company began by supplying oilskins to fishermen. Their waxed cotton suits proved so effective that on the outbreak of the Second World War, a version was issued to submariners. They also invented the first motorcycle jacket and were the last word in biker gear for trial riders.
Okay, Liz, see that top pocket? I think we're going to have to slant it a little bit more like the original garment.
Gary Janes, company designer, has the task of updating the Barbour look.
And maybe the position of the belt. I think, yeah, it's not bad, is it? Because it gives us the length.
But there's one jacket which hasn't changed since it first appeared in 1983. The best-selling Beaufort, as worn by Helen Mirren in her role as the Queen.
The interesting thing is this is an evolution of a jacket which was around in the 60s. Barbour's not a place where we actually design or have known designers, but a brand that has evolved using customers' experience, to be honest with you. And the only evolution to this was to put hand warmer, which was a customer request, to keep hands warm, and also a balance for the crook of your gun when you're walking around in the sort of countryside. It's relatively young in Barbour terms because we've been around 100 years, but it's probably our most known because it is the country set and we're known for country clothing. You can also see that we have the zip that Barbour's known for, which is a large ring pull. This allows you to open the jacket with gloves on, a gloved hand, and it also has the two-way zipper, which allows you to either sit across a horse, sit down in your car, or even sit down on a park bench when you're eating a sandwich. The Barbour Bellow cargo pockets is another main feature which we have, which will always incorporate drain holes. Any water that might seep into the pocket will always drain out and dry off naturally. And have what we refer to as a poacher's pocket on the side, and it's lined in nylon for two reasons: for the debris of the animal and also to stop water ingress up the jacket.
Barbour dresses everyone from poachers to pop stars. But the royal seal of approval is relatively recent. The Queen gave them her royal warrant in 1982.
I bought a Barbour jacket because the Queen had one. She's normally right, the Queen. Like, if you buy anything that she gets, it's usually good.
The Queen's rise as a fashion icon is all the more unlikely, given that she's a woman in her 80s whose dress sense has changed very little throughout her reign. Consolata Boyle, costume designer for the film The Queen, studied the royal style in minute detail and learned the secrets of her favourite clothes.
What we gleaned from all of this research was that she's, in a way, her life is dictated by duty. This is very, very important, that everything has a function. And that's everything, including her clothes. They do what they're meant to do and don't get in the way. That feeling of being at home in the country, and that's where you can see where she's at her most graceful and at her most at ease, that absolute comfort in what she's wearing. It's like a second skin, really. It starts with a tweed skirt, again, which she can move in with inverted pleats so that she can stride, because she still loves walking. Then we have a piece of knitwear, we have a twin set. And the single pearls, always single strand in the country. And then the beautiful headscarf, which always was worn quite far forward. The way the Queen uses headscarves is very, very interesting. And it almost is so familiar and so iconic. It's almost like a crown in the country.
If the Queen's relaxing, she reverts absolutely to type. She is basically a countrywoman, and she dresses like a countrywoman. Which is she most happy in, Kurt Geiger high heels or green wellies? We know the answer. Does she want to wear some formal dress, or does she want to wear a Barbour?
The Queen's love of the countryside began early on in life. The happiest days of her childhood were spent in the Highlands of Scotland with her parents and sister.
I often think that the Queen's life, her personal life, was snatched away from her at the age of 25 when her father died. That a lot of what she wears, in a way in her head, it's as though she was still connected to a world, that magical world, when she was living with her parents, the early years, if you like. So her whole life really was a country, if not idyll, certainly a country life.
Well, the point about the Queen is that the vagaries of fashion do not impinge, as far as I can see, on the Queen in any way. And to some extent, that is a kind of true definition of a style. I mean, you can have a bad style or a good style, but style is having something very distinctive. And, you know, what she wears is very much to do with the kind of traditional notions of Britishness.
The Queen's look has a global reach, and the latest fashion designers to plunder the royal style are perhaps the most surprising. Milan is the fashion capital of Italy, and home to Dolce & Gabbana and their glamorous European style. But for their autumn-winter 2008 collection, they startled the fashion world. Gone were the thigh-skimming leopard print dresses, and in their place was an unmistakable silhouette.
Impressed when Dolce & Gabbana suddenly turned their back on partying clubs, sort of metal, heavy metal, all those things they were doing, and almost said, the party's over, let's go back to real values. No doubt they'd seen The Queen, the movie, as well. But it just shows that royal dressing does stand for something in people's eyes all over the world. It stands for things that endure, fabrics that endure, quality of life that endures, values that endure. And I think that's why it will always be something that has a part and a place in fashion.
Italian fashion journalist Giusy Ferre has witnessed this trend firsthand.
Per gli italiani il vero codice inglese è lo stile, è lo stare in campagna. Per esempio due ragazzi come Dolce & Gabbana che hanno una formazione diversissima, cioè la loro formazione è tutta italiana. Era molto divertente la loro sfilata. Io capisco che si siano ispirati a un'icona sicura, cioè quello che emana dalla regina Elisabetta, dalle foto che noi vediamo così, è la sicurezza di sé, che non hanno forse i figli, per esempio, no?
In fashion terms, headscarves may turn out to be a one-season wonder, but tartan is far from flash in the pan. It's a staple fabric for designers like Alexander McQueen and Vivienne Westwood.
be just mad with tartan, yeah. But the great thing about tartan as well, it's very, very attractive. Tartan with tartan with tartan. But tartan looks wonderful with lace, velvet, tweed, silk, satin. Oh, it's just brilliant.
Tartan is this very British material. It's one of those materials that has shifted, if you like, its location from country to town and is equally at home in the city streets as it is in the countryside. It means tradition, it means quality. It's worn by the royal family, after all.
Tartan has a long fashion history and a royal association that goes back over 150 years. If it hadn't been for Queen Victoria, it's unlikely that it would be on the catwalks today.
We think she was about 16 when she wore this dress. It is, as you see, a wonderful tartan velvet. Queen Victoria's fascination with all things Scottish started when she was about 13. She was an articulate, intelligent, really rather bolshy teenager. And one likes to think of this young girl badgering her mother then for a beautiful Scottish dress.
Queen Victoria's fascination with tartan owed something to the fashionable novels of Sir Walter Scott, who used it to clothe his romantic heroes. She bought in wholesale to his mythical version of Scotland and its iconic cloth. Throughout her life, Victoria loved all things Scottish. She and her husband Albert acquired Balmoral in 1848 and decked it out in tartan.
She created, if you like, a kind of tartan fantasy land, really. Prince Albert himself regularly dressed in kilt and the rest of the traditional Highland garb. She would wear at dinner a tartan sash and dress the children in tartan, if you like, really fancy dress costumes.
The family didn't just wear tartan at Balmoral. Victoria was keen to promote plaid in her London life, and she made sure that each of her 9 children wore Highland dress, even as babies. This outfit belonged to Victoria's son and the future king, Edward VII.
It's very, very revealing to see just how flamboyantly this little boy was dressed. This is such a stylish little dress for a 2-year-old. And it's not surprising that that Edward went on to be one of the most snappy dressers of his generation, very experimental in his clothes. And I think this stems back to this time.
Edward VII's love of flamboyant dress never left him. In 1897, he commissioned the coatmakers Aquascutum to make this riding cape from a fabric that he designed himself, the famous Prince of Wales check. He was so impressed with the cape that he granted Aquascutum a royal warrant. Aquascutum, which means water shield in Latin, was founded by John Emery in 1851. Its sole purpose was to solve the problem of keeping warm and dry. Today, the backbone of the business remains its outerwear, and in particular, the trench coat.
Whole generation of royal family up there, haven't you? You've got Prince Philip, Prince Charles.
Aquascutum designers Graham Fiddler and Michael Hertz are tasked with remodelling the trench each season.
So you're going to take the whole trench thing back to like the 60s influence of that town?
Sort of, yeah.
So you get that sort of short, quite sharp, narrow look.
Yeah.
When we were asked to work for Aquascutum, The nice thing about it is there was something there to get hold of and build on. The challenge here wasn't finding out what the company was about. It was quite obvious what the company was about because of its heritage, because of the trench coat. Has Faye managed to get it all waterproof?
Yeah, I think so.
Gorgeous, love it. Really nice. The back's
I love
gorgeous,
it.
yeah.
The coat didn't begin life as a fashion garment. As its name suggests, it was an essential piece of kit for officers during the First World War. Now, what appear to be purely decorative details were designed for military purposes. The coat was tailored to the needs of trench warfare. The Sam Browne belt, made to hold gun, sword and ammunition, was held in place by the epaulettes. The D-rings on the belt were there to hang grenades. The gun flap was used to pad the shoulder against recoil. Designers today still pay homage to these details in each reworking of the trench coat.
So you've got very sexy little black dress silhouette on with the storm flap. Keep it collarless with the little epaulettes. Now you add a little belt there, and maybe some pockets taken from the trench coat. Immediately, with very minimal detailing, voila, trench dress. But, that's enough to make it recognisable as a trench coat.
It's 2:45. No one in the place except you and me.
The trench coat was adopted by Hollywood, and it swiftly became as iconic as the stars who wore it.
You do something to me, something that simply mystifies.
Because the one person who really understood the trench coat was Marlene Dietrich. It's extraordinary how she, single-handedly, if that's the word, managed to make the trench coat an extraordinarily sexual piece of apparel. Of course, the whole intimation was that the woman is wearing nothing underneath. I mean, that is the backstory.
Let's see it without the belt, Dario. I want to see it as a dress. There is a certain appeal when you put a trench coat onto a woman, you immediately belt the waist. It's quite sexy. And now let's belt it on the outside. We've had, girls that buy our trench coats in the wash silk, and they wear them to events as dresses. It's no longer about just protecting you from the rain. Love it. We should develop that for the show.
Yeah.
These days, there's a new form of trench warfare. Aquascutum's rival Brit brand Burberry also has strong trench credentials. Their stores are stuffed with this signature item. The company's founder, Thomas Burberry, invented gabardine, the classic fabric for the coat. Christopher Bailey, the creative force behind Burberry, is only too aware of the importance of this garment to the success of the company.
The trench coat will be in every single collection that I ever do, and every collection that ever exists within Burberry. Thomas Burberry was a huge innovator. So what I've always tried to do is go back to the roots, fabric innovation. In the collection that we've just worked on for Spring/Summer '09, I wanted it to be lightweight. I wanted the fabrics to be very natural, so I worked on a lot of linens and cottons and silks. But for example, the silk, I injected it with rubber. I think for me, the things that you can't change about the trench coat is the philosophy that it's democratic,
that it shouldn't just be a fashion item. It needs to talk to so many different people. And, you know, I love the fact that it can be sartorial and traditional and classic, and it can also be, you know, something that a regular person wears to the office.
The trench may appeal to many people, but there's another, equally historic coat which is elitist. The hunting jacket trumpets its upper-class pedigree, a garment for social peacocking if ever there was one. Yet even here, there are practical elements to the design.
What we have today, what we have when you're fully equipped to go out hunting, is the epitome of what is right to go out in the British winter and spend several hours outside doing it. This isn't fashion for fashion's sake, this is fashion because it works. This is a fantastic garment. It's very thick. I mean, it's incredibly thick, double layered. It has this woolen layer in here. It's a triple layer of wool here with an extra layer here, because when the rain comes down here, this will take the rainwater and the snow and the slush off the tops of your breeches, and it covers to some extent the top of your thighs. So it's a very good garment. It's incredibly warm. It's incredibly tough, because when you're hunting, you're crashing through trees and all sorts of things, and it does a fantastic job. This is a very interesting pocket, which many people wonder why it exists at all. And this is a hangover from the military. And in this little pocket, you'd keep your flint when you had a musket. Now, the reason why you kept your flint and your flint only in there was because if your flint didn't work, if it got wet, and you needed it to shoot the enemy, you were in big trouble. So you can reach into here, get your flint out, and know that your musket is going to fire.
I've always been really into equestrianism and horses and saddlery and bridlery and tweeds and hacking jackets and, you know, all of that. But I quite like bringing that into a very modern environment.
In the heart of London's West End, Luella Bartley has put the edge into privilege. Her urban take on country-inspired clothes has allowed her to reinvent this traditional class-ridden look.
I think it's inherently in all of us, really. That class thing is quite deep in people, whether you're fighting against it or whether you're impressed by it, or, you know, I kind of play with all those notions. This collection was very inspired by kind of hunting and those kind of very old English traditional sports. It was worn with riding boots, and I bought kind of, you know, the nicest riding boots that you could find. And then basically just got my friend who has a label called Noki to cut them up. I was like giving him all these like beautiful £500 boots, going, can you just cut them up and do whatever you want and put marker pen all over them? And, you know, they're my favourite shoes I think we've ever done. You know, they're just, they sort of sum up what I love about English culture. You know, it's like taking something very beautiful, customising it, and, you know, I had sort of my whole sort of riding community at home just up in arms. How could I do that to a riding boot? But, you know, that's what it's all about. So I think that's rather a brilliant boot.
This is a pair of boots that I bought very early one morning in Portobello, and I was just walking down the street and some furniture van suddenly threw out this parcel, and I noticed that it was a pair of boots. I picked it up and I said, how much do you want for the boots? And he said, oh, give me £3, mate. So I said, fine, and didn't even bother to knock him down, and off I went with the boots. It wasn't until I got home later that I looked inside, and in there somewhere is written in ink, H.M. the King. And I had no idea which king it was, so I went to see a bootmaker friend of mine called George Cleverley. And he took one look at them, and he looked at the foot, he looked at the champagne tops, and he said, "Oh, Edward VIII." Because Edward VIII abdicated, the boots were never delivered. So obviously these boots turned up in a house clearance years later, and I was fortunate enough to pick them up. I've now owned them for about 20 years. They've been exhibited in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And they were then valued 20 years ago at £3,000, so this is my pension.
Edward VIII famously hated the country, but loved the clothes. He was a fashion rule breaker. Dressing in the right style for the occasion meant nothing to him. As Prince of Wales, he took tweed out of the country estates and wore it in town, much to the initial horror of the older royals.
If you actually analysed his clothes, and I knew him, he looked rather ridiculous. He was so tiny, not much to put on him. But he was very beautiful, the Duke of Windsor, when he was young, and he did look wonderful in clothes. And he broke the mould in those sort of rather wonderful loud tweed suits you'd see him in. And they were sort of wonderful.
What we have here is we have a +4 suit that was worn by King Edward VIII as Prince of Wales. It is something that Edward was very proud of. He was blonde, blue-eyed and dapper. He would have worn this for country pursuits, in particular for golf. And you can see here his amazing correspondent shoes. We know that when he wore a little beret, this is Edward's beret, tens of thousands of people suddenly started wearing berets. It's through Edward that you see these styles becoming an accepted part of dress for the younger members of the middle and indeed the upper working classes by the 1930s.
In making the journey from country to town, tweed had become a classless fabric. The sports jacket was now a staple for most men.
Everyone's wardrobe was quite simple. It was a sort of unspoken need for people to appear smart. I mean, if you didn't have very much money, you had to at least, even if you were working class and quite poor, you would have a tweed jacket. In fact, I think mid-60s with, flower power and psychedelia and all of that and rock and roll sort of turned the thing over. And by the time you were into the 70s, there was a whole other idea of what men would wear. I mean, what I'm wearing has evolved out of that.
Traditional tweed may have all but disappeared from our city streets, but the country look has not.
Not so long ago, the Countryside Alliance put on their equivalent of the Million Man March. And what that was a terrific sort of rural fashion show. Suddenly we got the whole lot, and the voices.
Freedom and the countryside, purely and simply.
And I think people were rather taken by it.
It is a very distinctive coat, the livery there.
The allure of the countryside is as strong as ever. Every year, 150,000 people flock to the Country Landowners Association Game Fair, one of the highlights of the rural calendar.
What size can I get you? What size are you looking for?
Traditional outfitters Cordings set up their stall, doing a roaring trade in tweed for the country set.
You haven't got...
how many suits do you need?
I need 3 immediately.
I love it. I really do love tweed. Makes me remember to say please and thank you. Yeah, I sure would behave better when I'm dressed in tweed. It's kind of ennobling.
Cordings was founded in 1839 and quickly gained a loyal and royal following as the place to shop for outdoor pursuits. In 1871, Sir Henry Morton Stanley was kitted out here in preparation for his famous journey to find Dr. Livingstone.
I first became aware of cordings, I think, when I was in my mid-teens. I come from the country, and the highlight of our week would be to come up to London and listen to guitar players and musicians, and it was difficult to get home. I'd spend that time till dawn just walking the West End, and I remembered Cordings. It stuck in my mind as a place of tradition, you know, that something to do with the heritage of England. I went off from my life and went, you know, around the world playing guitar, and every now and then I would look in the window here, and I saw this suit. It was a sort of a moss green herringbone tweed suit, 3-piece. And I thought, God, that's beautiful. I mean, it was just the most exquisitely cut jacket. I plucked up the nerve, and it took quite a lot of courage. I don't know what that's about, but it's something to do with the fact that I've always considered, I mean, I'm a working class country boy, and this, in a way, was like entering a gentleman's club. I felt that I really wasn't entitled to come in here. So I came in, you know, very shyly and tried it on, and it was immaculate. It was thorn-proof. It was like wood. It was like wearing a green wooden suit. But I was like in there once a week from there. This is my favourite one, I think. I just feel like I've come to a kind of home in terms of what I need to be in the country. There you are. I mean, it's perfect. Perfect.
Eric Clapton loved the clothes so much he stepped in when it looked like the shop might have to close.
It seemed like it was really a preservation act. I thought I'd love to be able to keep this thing going, not for any other reason than just for me, so that I can come here, really. I mean, I'm very selfish in that way. At least that means I'll be able to carry on buying things anyway. And that was it. I had a problem with these originally because my skin is sensitive to wool. I don't like wearing wool. So those are just cotton. Yep. I mean, this is the most beautiful shirt you can get for anything to do with the countryside. The beauty of this shop is it does cater for people like me. And it verges on the eccentric, you know, a home for eccentrics. And if it was, where would I go? I mean, if it wasn't for that, or where would the other people? I mean, it is interesting to stay in here for an hour or two and watch the kind of people that come and shop here. Not your everyday high street shopper, really. Thank God. That'll open up, you know, and doesn't, because a lot of people, it's funny how people don't really get it right, or they'll go shooting and forget to have something like that, and they'll miss birds by miles because they can't get their arms all the way up, you know. It's really quite important to have that. I am a traditionalist at heart. I mean, but I also like, you know, a lot of modern things too. And the interesting thing to me is to watch how all of this can evolve.
I mean, the original tweeds colours to blend in with Scotland and things. So I searched around London, sampled colours. I even sort of got a little chisel and chiselled up bits of the road to get kind of charcoal colours. Sent the colours off to be dyed at yarn people in Scotland. And then we started weaving the design.
Guy Hills and his business partner Kirsty McDougall are on a mission to reinvent tweed for an urban landscape.
We sort of felt that to have a sort of London camouflage or a London version of a very, very hard-wearing and practical fabric would be quite an interesting idea.
It's the original sportswear, really. People think denim, that's what you need. But funnily enough, it doesn't dry as quickly as wool. It doesn't wick and keep you cool as wool. It's not actually as waterproof as wool. Wool has, you know, natural lanolin. So tweed, sort of, which is made of wool, has all those qualities.
Kirsty uses a small loom to design each cloth before sending off the samples to be manufactured in larger batches.
I think it's working out 3D sort of mathematics. You've got to work out how a thread will travel through a set of threads, where it's going to go, if it's going to go over 4, over 2, over 3, and then what's going to happen to it after that. So it's building up the threads into a structure.
One of the first designs we came up with was with the double yellow line one, which is, can I show it to you? This one. There's a colour we call wet pavement, which is, if you actually walk along Piccadilly at kind of sunset, and as the sky is sort of turning red and it's blue and things, you get the kind of beautiful purple sheen. So it's one of my favourite colours. I like purple a lot. I'm very happy to jump on a bicycle with this. In fact, I had little special tab and buttons put inside here, so you just turn them inside out. You simply put them together like this, and look, it fastens around your ankle so that it doesn't go in the chain. And then my wife said, why don't you wear one of those horrible orange reflective vests on top? And I said, I've just cut this most beautiful urban tweed suit for cycling around town. There's no way I'm wearing a reflective tabard to ruin the look. But it got me thinking, and I thought, well, hang on. Now I've got this weave design studio, why don't I actually weave reflective yarn into the designs? So we started doing that. And actually, the ultimate thing I can show you is this great designer called the Grey Raver, which has got a lot of things in. Shall I show you? Can you see that? It's incredibly reflective. Does that work?
We're great fantasists in this country. I think we act as a nation more than any other nation in the world. We play parts.
In England, everybody dreams of a cottage with roses round the door. And as we've noticed, most people want to wear those roses, trailing all over everything. The absolute passion for florals is an entirely British thing. I don't see it anywhere else.
The first designer to really cash in on the British love of florals believed that inside every urban woman was a country maiden waiting to get out. Laura Ashley's clothes took Edwardian period costumes and gave them a hippie twist.
So pretty, aren't they? London girls emerging as country girls. Strange as it may sound, this pastoral trend in fashion didn't start down on the farm, but right here in the big city.
Laura Ashley's floral revolution took hold in the 1970s. These were affordable high street clothes for women who wanted to buy into the country dream.
It was an innocence, I think, that she sold. Although, you know, as one that wore those clothes at that time, they didn't seem particularly wholesome to me. They seemed rather glamorous. I mean, they were actually the same time as Bieber. And so you had this kind of hippie, kind of bohemian, free feeling about it, you know, that you could just waft around untrammeled by kind of major concerns. That was very winning.
Laura Ashley and her husband Bernard had taken 2 decades to come up with the look which was to make the brand famous.
We didn't have a roof over our heads. We really did live in a tent because all the money was going into dye stuffs and petrol for the delivery van. And that was 20 years of trying and struggling and failing and picking themselves up.
They only really took off when they started printing and making dresses that were against the prevailing fashion as a reaction against the 60s.
Miniskirts had dominated during the 60s, but Laura Ashley swam against the tide of rising hems.
Yes, it's very sweet, isn't it?
That's very good.
Yes, but the hem here is quite nice. I mean, that's rather sweet there, isn't it?
She single-mindedly went in and did this, you know, eyelash to toenail in lace and and printed cotton, and it became a look, but there wasn't anyone else doing the look at the time. This ear dress represents what captured people's imagination. You know, it was anti-fashion. Everyone else was polyester miniskirts, bright primary colours, you know, get it out and display it all. And with my mother, it was cover it up, be chaste, but with a suggestion of some promise to be fulfilled at a later date if you're charming enough, sort of fashion. And through the magic of mass production, which was my father's side, she was the artisan, he was the mass producer, and between them they made a product that until that point had only been available to the few. Suddenly she made it available to the masses, and the masses said, wow, let's go, you know.
The business that had begun on a kitchen table became a global success. At its height, Laura Ashley had more than 500 shops around the world, with a new one opening every day. By now, not only could you wear Laura Ashley prints, but you could decorate your house in them too.
For a very small amount of time, she had the same print in the same colour on the wallpapers and on the dresses.
It could look a bit ridiculous.
And at the British Embassy in Washington, once my mother went to a dinner in her honour, and someone turned up wearing one of these dresses and just disappeared into the room. It was just his head floating around the room. And it was at that stage that that my mother decided that the two had to be split. There was a battle, once things had taken off, to actually control what the actual company was, because by the time the press had got hold of it, it was much more sort of flake advert and Silvercrin advert. So we were constantly having to kind of bring things back and suppress them a bit.
Because it could get corny, couldn't it,
really
very quickly?
Could. Yeah.
For me, taking all the photographs, I would refuse to let my models, who are mostly friends, be photographed with horrible milkmaids' caps on. And later, by about 1976, I really rebelled and decided that the photographs had to become very contemporary. And because I was at art college with members of the group that would become The Clash, I did some experimental photographs with The Clash in them. I think the company at the time banned the use of the pictures.
Laura Ashley's designs didn't need edge to score highly with country-loving townies. But by the early 80s, the appeal was beginning to wear off. So they moved away from florals and created their most successful item of all.
This blouse is called the BL254, and it was absolutely the best-selling blouse of all time, Laura Ashley. And the reason why is because it's the most perfect, everyday business blouse.
It did actually belong to her.
She used to wear this, so she obviously liked it. It was that meteoric at one stage that, especially when America cottoned onto this, we actually had to have at one stage a whole factory dedicated to making nothing but this blouse. It was like a real bestseller. It was like printing money, basically. You know, people were buying multiples of them, and Princess Diana started wearing them as well.
Lady Diana Spencer wore the traditional country clothes that the upper classes had always worn. Now, they were on show to a fresh audience, and she became the figurehead for the look dubbed Sloane Ranger.
What Princess Diana did was put the young Sloane Ranger dress code on a national stage, and suddenly it was fashion. Country clothes were a big part of the Sloane uniform. When people talk about style anglais, that's what they mean. They mean trad Sloane kit.
I think the Sloanes in the 1980s were terribly, terribly serious in what they were wearing. There was this identikit kind of, idea of wearing what your parents and grandparents had worn, and it was a set style because people did want to conform.
Fashion for women dates more than clothes for men. And when you look at it, you recognise that the things that I suppose are particularly in 1981, that point when the world started to know about Princess Diana. For instance, this sort of Dog Toby shirt affair with the sort of ruffles there. And of course, the headband, that's the most ancien Sloane thing possible. And of course, these tremendously sensible, conservative, flattish shoe that people just don't wear now.
These were the clothes of well-heeled boys and girls. They showed that you had a house in the country, that you were above fashion, that you were a bit posh. It was a look that was perfect for the mood of the time.
I think people were ready for Sloane Rangers. They were ready for a dose of money in the early 80s. They were ready for a dose of conservatism. There was new money welling up in London. And if you made some new money, you wanted to be like old money.
By night, this meant dressing like a debutante and getting squiffy at a ball. This was the era of the party dress.
The Sloane has always been kind of a big inspiration to me. That whole kind of Sloane-ish attitude, it is kind of like very sort of uptight English, the rules and all that kind of stuff, and then just falling apart as soon as they get to some kind of party and get stinkingly drunk. So, and I love all those kind of, I've got a whole archive of those 80s Tatlers and Vogues and where you have all those party pictures, and they're just such a good source of inspiration. So there's always that kind of dress in the collection, a dress to kind of, feel great in when you're at home and then kind of fall home in.
Luella Bartley's reinvention of the Sloane wardrobe doesn't stop here. Not even the floral frock is safe from her modernising march through the back catalogue of country looks.
This dress, which came from the Geek collection, sort of started life as a very pretty sprig print tea dress. But then we kind of put it in quite garish colours and we gave it a kind of cartoonish shape, developed it so it was a little more poppy. And then obviously adding the kind of like hard elements of the power net and the plastic, and it becomes a much more kind of dangerous dress as opposed to, the pretty flower print dress. But obviously that's what it is as well. So, it's playing again with those sort of mixes, those contrasts. It has to have a twist. I'm not happy if something's just nice. It has to have some kind of wrong reference to it. Even if you can't see that wrong reference, it has to be in there somewhere.
Reinvention doesn't have to be edgy to breathe new life into a classic. The most recent phenomenon that rivals Laura Ashley for bringing nostalgia-inspired country style to the high street is Cath Kidston.
Businesses that are sort of based on taking tradition and reworking it have always appealed to me. In print, florals are classic, aren't they? They're the kind of queen of print. And it's something, I guess, it enables one to work with lots of colour combinations, shapes, patterns. I have a very strange memory. I can hardly remember my own telephone number, but I can remember print and colour for some reason. I've got a really photographic memory for that kind of thing.
Cath Kidston has built her empire on reworking vintage finds. Her team of designers regularly visit antique fairs looking for inspiration.
It's really fun, isn't it?
I mean, it's really important, for me, working with vintage stuff, that it doesn't look old in the sense of dowdy. It's got to look fresh and cheerful for it to appeal to me.
Let's look at those.
And this is cool. The planes.
Oh.
What excites me is taking something like an old small child's dress print, taking the kind of character of it, maybe redoing the colours, and then perhaps having it plastic coated so it has a shiny finish. But it's just that thing of how can one take tradition and rework it. The only thing with a print like that that's really kind of so pretty and all the rest of it, it needs something, doesn't it, to brighten it up.
I think it's a bit too sugary. It's missing.
The only thing is we could make it more sugary and really shocking pink.
Yeah.
Quite bright.
Like a really
and then
bright
it's
one.
quite
Yeah.
interesting. The product is very friendly. It is this sort of feel-good factor somehow. There's a sort of humour and a slightly sort of, it fits in with like Carry-On films, all those kind of things, and a cheekiness that I really like, which I have to say is totally British, isn't it?
What she's totally tapped into, though, is the safety of the nursery, and it's a nursery that most people never had. That interest and fondness for the state of childhood is something that's quite a big factor in British style.
The romanticisation of the past has always been a big thing with the British. This longing for when things were simpler. They probably never were, but looking back, they seem as if they were.
Harking back to the past as a refuge from the realities of the present is part of the British psyche. It's part of our fashion story too. Classic country style is reassuring, comforting and protective when ill winds blow. Is it any coincidence that it's being rediscovered as global recession looms?
Times are hard, so people search for comfort in looks and ideas and people that are reassuring.
People are coming back to that quintessential British style of things that are made to last, and especially, coming up into times of trouble, I think people turn to that. People turn to things that are comforting and that are lasting and that won't go away.
There's one person whose dress sense chimes with this need for solidity and tradition.
People want something that's a classic that is secure, and the Queen represents that more than anything else. I mean, it's extraordinary. She is dressed the same way through her entire reign.
This unchanging conservative style is something that younger royals seem set to continue.
Princes William and Harry dress in a very, very traditional way. They are locked into a dress code which isn't far from their father's dress code. It has nothing to do with fashion.
Even royal-in-waiting Kate Middleton understands that there's a uniform for a job in the firm.
It just is a kind of public school look. Again, clothes that, aren't going to shock anybody, that are kind of really quite pretty and attractive, not too overtly sexy on the whole. Her spot in the style landscape is very similar, I think, to the Princess of Wales's.
Throughout history, no one has sported the country look quite like the royals.
It's absorbed through their pores. I think it literally is a way of dressing that they have devised for themselves. It's strangely quirky. It has a fearlessness in its ugliness sometimes, but in a way that shows a courage. It's a very eccentric and wonderful look. It really is.
The appeal of this look doesn't just depend on the royal seal of approval. Traditional country clothes have become part of the national fabric. Like those who wear them, they're full of contradictions, no nonsense and romantic, democratic and class-ridden, conventional and radical, smart and scruffy. The country look is unique, eccentric, and unmistakably British style genius at work.
A British clothing institution under threat. Later here on BBC Two, the ageing tailors of Savile Row urgently need new young blood in the profession at 11:20. But next tonight, a fashion and music icon back after nearly 20 years. Later, live with Jules Holland in a moment.